All right. Well, I think we are good to get started. Um, it's after 1 o'clock, and we were trying to we usually like to wait a few minutes, but maybe we can do a quick run of intros and go. Actually, if you guys don't mind, maybe I'll just like set everybody up and kick us off from there, if that works.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Excited to kind of have a fun conversation with some new faces today. I'll do a quick round of intros. I'm Andrew Yanisic. I'm a group creative director here at Basic. On our line, and I don't know if everybody's in the same position that we have. We have Erwin Hines, one of our creative directors here at Basic, along with Veronica Cordero on my right. Who's one of our associate creative directors here. I'd like to welcome, for one of the first times, Ashley Rochelle, our VP of operations here at Basic. Yes, welcome. Thank you for joining. Slow clap. As well as two new guests we haven't had on. So really excited to kind of bring in Amy Asherman, head of archives and brand heritage at Herman Miller, as well as Ben Groom, chief design officer at Herman Miller. So thank you both for joining the conversation. Really excited to kind of kick things off and have a really, I think, timely conversation around space, decor, furniture, which seemed like a first and a perfect opportunity to bring you two on to kind of offer your perspective on some of the things that's going on in the world today, given a renewed focus on the space that we all live in, right? I guess if that's a fair way of putting it, live, work, eat, sleep, work out, everything, everything in for many of us. But yeah, I think just to kick us off, and we can kind of, as we like to do it, these things kind of take a meandering conversational tone. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that has been coming up for us lately is obviously we're all in a much more close-knit relationship with the places that we live. We've seen a renewed focus. You see a ton of collaborations with some of the cultural leaders out there, like Virgil Abloh, and a focus on furniture and the space that we're living in. And one of the things that comes in is this sort of a signal to everybody? Curious about everybody's opinion. Is this sort of a signal on a renewed cultural focus on the space that we live in? Are people really, taking a new consideration for the things that they buy, the spaces that they live in, and how they work for them? Because our space now has to be so many more things than maybe it used to be. Open-ended. I don't need to point that at anybody.
I'm happy to kick things off, Andrew, and thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here, and thanks for the kind introduction. I should point out, my role is digital, not head of design, but certainly design is a really big part of it. But just so the audience is aware, my designer pedigree is probably not quite what that intro suggested. But yeah, I think it's a fascinating time, right? And I think what's really happening is, you only have so much mind share, and you only have so much kind of investment that you can put into certain things at any given point in time. And I think just given what's happened to all of us, spending much more time at home, we're naturally shifting that investment and our mind share to the space that we're in most of the time. And I think, shifting it away from eating out, shifting it away from travel, and really focusing on how can we improve the space that we're in to make this the happiest experience we can, going forward. So that's certainly happening. And we're certainly seeing it in our business, given that we, sell furniture and home lifestyle products. It's really fascinating, but, we'd love to hear from the group.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the things that made me excited about this conversation as a whole has been seeing the shift of like even hype culture into the world of furniture. And so like there's people like Virgil who have been doing a lot of collaborations with IKEA and all of this other stuff. And then he also just designs furniture on his own as a trained architect. But then you also have people like Samuel Ross, who's another fashion designer for a Cold Wall. And it's like this huge transition from what was hype culture and streetwear, which is like this accessible, conversational, sort of cultural lens of looking at fashion, that's now being transported and ported into the world of furniture design, which to me is like really interesting. And then even if you're going through like the blogs like Hypebeast or High Snobiety, they have like highlights of people's interiors, right? So it's really this interesting cultural shift from the things that we wear on a day-to-day basis being how we generate coolness and all of that stuff when we're out, to now what could be the generator of coolness and clout is really what we have in our homes.
The Eames Lounge is the ultimate grail. It's hard to like trade that on a network like that, but
exactly,
definitely something that, as somebody who also loves fashion and seeing the, to your point, like the sneakerheads are now the like secondhand furniture like picker. I want an original Eames Lounge or an Aeron chair. Like that's transferring, and I think because we're all growing up a little bit, and your house is your, like, you entertain people, or we're all in each other's houses right now. And it's sort of like the signifiers of like, this is who I am. I have eggs on my wall. I got my bookshelf because books are cool. And now it's like, I saw Virgil do something with IKEA, or like we had Tyler, the creator, sitting in an Eames Lounge chair a few years ago on his show. And I just think about like who that opened up, like Herman Miller especially, which we're not, I think we're finding our way back to being a consumer facing brand, which is what we started as. But moments like that where an object like the Eames Lounge chair being introduced, and also like, hey, this is cool. A chair is cool. Like, I think the notion of a chair being cool is like something I've always, like, I'm a furniture dork, but I've loved seeing it now, like rail mentality featured to stuff for your house that you live with, and then it's also like stuff that you can keep forever. So that's, at least that's how I live with furniture.
Yeah, and I was like, I feel like all of us here as creatives probably have always been like this. Like we're always like, oh, we want really nice furniture, and that's been our like lens or perspective. But now it's like opening up to this larger audience and larger market. And because it is your home, it's like the one place and space that is completely reflective of who you are. And so it's nice to now see this mixture of high and low. So it's not just you're going for everything expensive, you're actually going for things that help tell your story of who you are. Very similar to what we've seen with the mixing of high and low with fashion as well.
Yeah, and more people are seeing it, right? Because it's in your backdrop on these talks.
Yeah.
And I think even the spaces that people are willing to invest in within their homes are a broader range of spaces. In the past, it was only like the spaces that people would see. And I think people are now seeing more spaces because we're moving around with our laptops and showing those spaces.
Well, I was going to say in Europe, you know, there's very much so a difference in culture between Northern Europe and Southern Europe. And in Northern Europe, they really pride themselves on their homes and their spaces. They're very design-led, as we know. Some of the best designers come out of Scandinavia. And a lot of it is because they're spending so much time in their homes, entertaining people, living their lives in their homes, because the environment that they live within half of the year really kind of forces them to spend a lot of time indoors. And it's interesting with the pandemic and with COVID, we're all kind of being forced into that, even though it's not necessarily an environmental thing. And because of that, I think it's like really forcing us to also, to, you know, Erwin's point, attach our identities to our homes and the experiences that we want to create in our homes and how we want to leverage that. So to Amy's point, like, you know, having eggs up on her wall is like, you know, a way of describing who she is as a person, so that when people come in their home, because they're going to spend a lot of more time with Amy in her home, they know who she is. She has an identity attached to it. And it really does, come down to the fact that we are all spending more time in our homes, so we're going to prioritize that, and it's going to now be, a big part of our culture moving forward in our lives.
I think what's interesting to Ash is we're not only expecting our identity to show, but we're expecting our spaces to work harder for us. And because of the fact that we're stuck and not stuck, that we're in our homes so often, we expect things to function in multiple kind of facets. So we're not only thinking about our living space, but it's also our entertaining space, our workspace, our school, or a classroom essentially. And so that's really forced us to think about how we optimize space. And then just thinking about how places in Asia and Japan, they're really so good at kind of maximizing spaces and transforming spaces. And I've kind of seen myself personally do this in my own house. I'm like, okay, I have a lounge, but how do I actually adapt and make this, my also entertainment space or even a workplace if I need to. So that's definitely a really big shift in terms of how we see space and how we approach it. And personally, I actually just purchased a new home during COVID, and we actually sought out specific kind of checklists when we were kind of buying a house. And I would say that has dramatically shifted from pre-pandemic. I think what was important for us back then is probably not as important for us now. So even just the fact of like indoor, outdoor, and just being more immersed in as much as we can, more of these different environments or different spaces that we can create in our home have been such a huge shift, especially for me personally.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on that, I also moved during this pandemic, and one of the main motivations for that was I was living in downtown San Diego. I had a smaller place. The office that I worked at, that we all work out of, was an extension of my living space every day at the end of the day. And when all of that got reeled back in, I decided I need a space for, the dog. I need a space for my office so I'm really big on zoning, right? It's like important for me to have a different space where I can move through so I can say, hey, here's where I can relax and here's where I can focus. And I thought that I would have an office and I'd get in there and I'd be like, that's the spot that I do that. And one of the things I quickly realized was like versatility of my space was like so much more important. Like just because I have an office space now doesn't mean that I don't want to go sit out on the patio and be able to sit in the sun and work as well. Or sit down in the living room. Especially, and maybe this is more important, in a creative space or like a stimulating space, but like having those external stimuli change up on me every so often was an incredibly important thing. And so, it's funny, I have been cautious about buying furniture because I'm like, I don't know exactly what I need as like my values are changing through this like stage.
But that's a considerate way to buy furniture too, because you're not just like throwing stuff in a space, you're kind of observing yourself and understanding what you need out of it. And then that's ultimately you're going to make more informed purchases or not. I mean, in the zoning, it's like I literally have an office chair at my kitchen table, and that's sort of out of space necessity, but also, I mean, people live in smaller spaces and you need it to do a lot of things for you. Therefore, picking stuff that is nice to look at, if that's something that brings you joy or is important to you.
That's one of the things that I quite love about, some of the very infamous designers that exist and are, the products are still sold today by Herman Miller, is that what we're talking about is people who, many of these designers, especially the Eames, really looking to create functional furniture that you could leverage and utilize, that could adapt to your environments, could be, leveraged with kids in the house, and also like look beautiful and support a certain type of lifestyle. So like the lifestyle that I immediately gravitate to, which is what Veronica talks about, is that indoor, outdoor California living that was, just really like cemented in the 1960s, really leveraging like the Palm Springs lifestyle, if you will. And that's what's so incredible, in my opinion, about why Herman Miller and design within reach are still so relevant today, and your guys' products are still so relevant today, is that the designers that are behind each one of those products have actually been thinking about and conceptualizing what we're all kind of living and talking through today. It's almost as if it is more relevant than it ever has been. And that's why you're also seeing such a dramatic focus, in my opinion, on buying and leveraging furniture for those experiences.
Let me ask you this, let me point this to you, because obviously the shopping experience, and you'll know this has changed so dramatically, during this time. And especially for a brand that sells such staple like pieces, right? Like many people who are buying, products through you all or furniture through, they're buying forever pieces. And I imagine that traditionally that's like an experience that most people really, really, really wanted to like showroom. What have you noticed in terms of just like consumer behavior or pain points for them in terms of like how they're shopping specifically for the furniture that they buy through you all?
Yeah,
if any.
Yeah. Firstly, I want to like reinforce what you just said, and that is that these purchases are, and we know from our consumer research that they're highly emotional, highly considered purchases. And whilst the time scale might have sped up a little bit in the purchasing journey during this period, I think that same emotion and need for advice is just as prevalent now as it was pre-COVID. And a lot of that, has typically been managed through, a showroom or a store visit to speak with a highly trained, account executive, which is what we call them, that would talk you through the purchase and understand your space. We have staff members that would typically go and visit your house, right, and walk around your space and really advise you on how to think about it, help you design your space, and then give you product recommendations. So like, how do you replicate that in a COVID world and try and minimize the obvious pain points? We've had a lot of success, and we were really lucky that we rolled this out pre-COVID with what we describe as next generation chat, right? And we've gone the opposite direction of what a lot of companies are doing right now, where the people accepting our chats, so that the people that are on the other end of the keyboard are our highly trained salespeople. They often have, design training. They may be former interior designers, rather than what a lot of companies are moving towards right now, which is AI and bots. Like, we really believe for how considered our purchases are, we have to continue to provide this advice from human beings with that design training. And we're just trying to deliver it in more of an e-commerce and omni-channel experience. And then the other really cool thing about what we rolled out is from the same widget, you can not just have a phone call, right? But you can have like basically a FaceTime experience where they can start showing you the product and talking about the product with you over a video call. And it's so important. If you think about buying a sofa, so much of it is the sit, so much of it is how it behaves when you sit in it. And certainly, I've been talking with some of our staff members that are on the other end of giving this advice, and they're like, yeah, they asked me to sit in it, and they ask me how it feels, and they watch me do it. And, that's certainly been, a key way to deliver, I think, what's really important advice during this period. But, we're still working it out. There's still pain points. But yeah, I'd love to hear. I'm sure you guys have other clients that are working on similar questions, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have an example, maybe an analogy. We work with a company called Silver Oak, and they sell wine. And I think one of the really interesting things about that experience is like so much of the wine tasting experience is about actually tasting the wine. And when you lose that physical experience of that, how do you go about describing that to somebody else? And I love that you're doing a more white glove approach to this and making it more personal, and hey, take me through your home and let's talk about this together, because that's ultimately what it is, right? This is somebody who might be buying the anchor piece for their living room that they're going to build everything else around. And a lot of people who aren't, maybe they know what they like, they have great taste, but they're not sure how to do it all. I feel like that's the right step, you know, to say, hey, let's talk about this together. There's not a rush. This is a journey, and this is something you're going to live with for a long time. You know, what's the equivalent though, when I bring it back to that wine analogy, is, you know, like tasting notes, you know, you can describe this experience in a maybe a slightly different way, as a way of maybe talking about how could you describe the sitting experience. I don't know what that looks like, but, or sounds like, and maybe that's ridiculous, but I think it's interesting as what other ways could we describe that experience to somebody or give them that experience? And right now it sounds like people are just saying, hey, tell me how it feels.
Yeah.
I would say too, though, for furniture and something like wine, there's a lot of storytelling that goes into why people like, well, who designed it? When was it designed? Where is it made? What's it made out of? Where do the materials come from? Like all of these different points that when somebody's making this considered emotional purchase, they want to hear that. And even having spent time with account executives in like a DWR, who are the same people on the other side of the screen. So they know that when somebody comes in and is thinking about an Eames lounge that they've been thinking about for a long time, and maybe they've seen it or they've never sat in one, they want, well, who designed it? Where is it? I mean, there's all of that that goes into purchase that is beyond even how it feels. And I think especially a customer that's buying wine or buying furniture, the myth making part of it too is important, because then it's an experience. It's a lifestyle thing. Not that it's like bullshit. It's all true, because we can tell the stories of our product and tell you why it's the best. But you have a human doing that, and usually it's somebody who's very design sympathetic or a designer themselves.
Yeah, and look, obviously, you know, e-commerce product pages can play a more powerful role, and that was something we obviously spent a lot of time working with you guys on, you know, in redesigning the new DWR.com. And we believe they're like the richest product pages in the industry now, which is something we've worked very hard on, but nothing replaces a human conversation about this stuff. Like all those things you just talked about, Amy, you know, the one I would add, which I'm always fascinated about, is like, when has that piece of furniture done something interesting in history? Like who sat in it? When was it somewhere interesting? You know, like I hate even bringing it up, but like the presidential debate this week, you know, this chair that I'm sitting in was the moderator's chair.
I noticed.
Yeah, it's like,
I noticed.
I think it was the only good thing about that debate, but you know, it was there, right? It was part of you know, something that was a famous moment, or maybe an infamous moment. You know, Amy, you could probably give 10 examples of these chairs being at a you know, very critical point in history, and you know, I think contributing. You know, the founders of Google talk about the Eames lounge and ottoman being one of their favorite places to, you know, lie in and come up with ideas, right? So what role has that chair played in some of the innovation that we're now surrounded by?
Yeah, I like being out and about and like noticing product in places, like whether it's in a painting conservation lab or like SZA sitting one in the studio, like making music, or I think there's like a great photo of Muhammad Ali in a lounge chair. So there's these moments in time where you see these design objects and you maybe don't even know who makes it or who designed it, but you recognize it as it's been around. It has staying power. I recognize that is what a chair can look like, because I think so much of your built environment, especially architecture and like interiors, you kind of have to pick what you like. Industrial designers have a lot of power. They get to decide what things look like that we live with. And so to train your own taste or like reason why you want to bring something into your house, there's all these different check boxes that you can check that tie to culture too.
Yeah,
that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, as you talk about it too, right? And what you both get, it's like objects as symbols. And I think what's really interesting is like, especially when it comes to fashion, I'll take it back to where, Erwin was kind of nodding to it earlier, and Amy, you were talking about this as well. You're saying something when you put, the stripes on, or you're saying something when you got a swoosh on your shirt. It represents something. And I think that what's interesting and challenging maybe about, even just, furniture or home decor is not everything that comes from that same brand or has that same story or consideration has the same level of recognition. An Eames lounger may, but maybe the kitchen table doesn't. It's sort of, as we all look at this and you look at people's backgrounds, like there's this melody at play behind you that does communicate some part of your value system. And it tells me a little bit about somebody. And, as much as it is bad to judge a book by its cover, it's what we all do as beings. But I think that's so interesting as like just the symbolism of objects in your space.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I definitely relate to that. I think, especially as like someone who is really like inspired by their environment, I try to be very thoughtful in what I select, and really inspired by a lot of architecture as well. And so just the ideologies when an object is made, or when a building is created, there is something really special about being able to attach yourself to that, or to be able to relate to what that architect or that artist or creator was thinking at that time, and to find a sense of kind of connection in a way that you can try to embody that in your everyday or your ideal lifestyle, which is why some of the pieces at Herman Miller and DWI are just so timeless, because those have really stood the test of time, and they stand for something. And I think that's really hard to come by, especially within the world of interior design today, is that there's a lot out there, but then there's only going to be those few pieces that actually have some meaning and actually have ideologies and principles and something that people can actually attach themselves to, which is really, really powerful.
I'll take us back to, and it bounces back to where this conversation, or this part of this conversation, first started. The romance and the story behind these objects or the pieces of furniture in your space, I actually think in the world we live in is actually so much more important, because of what you were describing, Ben, is like the sit's gone. I don't get to do it. I don't get to like walk around it. We can get as close as we want through technology, right? Technology is going to help us get part of that done, but the story is something you can deliver in a really compelling way. So what ways have you all looked to really try and deliver some of that romance, some of that story, communicate, the history and in sort of your channels?
Yeah, look, it's something we're working on every day, but let me give you some examples, right? It's a great opportunity when you refresh a website to take a really good look at the copy. And that I'm just so glad that it was this point in time that we did that. Certainly for DWI.com, we're still in the process of refreshing many of our other sites, but we looked at our all of our product pages and rewrote most of it, and we really listened to, and we did about 200 hours of customer research leading into that point in the project, and the biggest piece of advice we were getting from our customers is exactly what we're talking about right now, which is like, you're not giving me all the information I need to make such a considered purchase. Like, help me out here. And so we just spent time trying to storytell in a better way, and trying to give more practical information. Is this product pet friendly? Is it, how well is it going to wear and tear? And so we spent a lot of time on that. The other thing that was a real point in time recently, which just stands out in my mind, was, really when COVID started hitting home for our retail business. And, we had to start, we're obviously sending out emails on a regular basis and doing all this customer communication. And we had to start talking, obviously, in an environment where a lot of people are getting sick, a lot of people are dying, we're closing places. And there was a moment that I vividly remember where we just started humanizing our voice much more to be sympathetic to the moment. But I think it flowed through to how we were talking about, like, I just think we just became incrementally more human because of what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we've kept that up ever since, which has been nice. But yeah, look, it's a challenge. There's so much storytelling that needs to happen. I think, these kind of conversations are a great medium. I love, Amy's, we were talking about it earlier, the kind of Instagram live period that kind of happened for a while there during COVID. I feel like it's fallen off a little bit, but there was a lot of cool storytelling that was happening through that medium. I think video generally is a great medium that is underappreciated by our industry. So yeah, there's a lot that can still happen.
I would say, just to your point, Ben, like, I think in a way, at least, so I manage the archives and the brand heritage. So we're kind of lucky as a company that we have a wealth of stories that are waiting to be told, or we can tell them in a different way. Like, we have sort of all of the source material that exists. And then also the way that we continue to engage design partners is that it's authored design. So there's always going to be a story, because it's like somebody who's the new Eames, or somebody, it's Clara von Zwigerberg at Hay, or Anna Cross and her cool new lamps. And there's always storytelling that can happen that's in the same way that we storytell with Alexander Girard or George Nelson. It's kind of continuing the legacy. We aren't the dusty archives. We are the very alive and sharing, and everything is still sort of relevant, and we give stuff context. And I think with Instagram Live, and then also, we have Y Magazine on Herman Miller, where we're publishing stories. We did a project with the Library of Congress last year where we restored the color and film on 3 of Charles and Ray Eames's films that they made for Herman Miller. So effectively, really cool commercials that they made, and we helped out the Library of Congress, and we put those on our website. So it's sort of like, hey, you're stuck at home. Here's 3 minutes of an amazing Charles and Ray Eames film that also talks about soft pad, which would be great for your home office. And it's all like, we don't even have to try that hard in some ways, because it's great content that we can constantly draw from and iterate on.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's a pedigree there and a value system that people already have a connection to. Sorry, Ben, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, just to add, like, I get really excited about what design is emerging right now that we don't fully realize yet. If you think about, we've been talking about Charles and Ray Eames a lot, but and I'm no expert compared to Amy, but what I do know is that a lot of their designing and innovation happened during and coming out of World War II, right? The Kazan machine and what flowed from that. And so I promise you that's happening right now. There are a bunch of really impressive, smart, younger, hopefully diverse designers that are sitting at home going, this is broken. We can fix this, right? And we spend a lot of time, it's cool to work for a company like us. We talk about these problems, right? We're all dealing with Zoom fatigue. We're all dealing with an inability to switch off from work because we're staring at our office all, 24 hours a day. These are real human problems that we need to solve. Like, what design is going to solve them? And we're trying to have multiple calls in a small space at the same time while trying to homeschool. How do you fix that? And so I'm really excited to see what really famous designers emerge from this period.
Agree.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, I'm curious, especially as you look back and what you're speaking about now, like an eye towards the future. Obviously, there's a pendulum swing, right, culturally, that we're all seeing and that you are living with as a brand. Where do you see things going? What kind of conversations are happening behind your guys' doors about, like, how are value systems for consumers, for culture, changing in a way that's relevant to you? Or will what we see today, how familiar do you think that'll look in the future, or from a value system standpoint, or what do you think will go away?
Yeah, look, there's a lot happening right now. I think from a in terms of value-based conversations, I think for us, there are two really strong themes that I think were consistent pre-COVID, but and pre Black Lives Matter and everything that's happening, but have kind of been amplified, and they are obviously diversity and inclusion, and the other one being sustainability. That's really important to us. And there's lots we could talk about here, but I just think that the thing that we're observing in our company, I think hopefully in every company, and broadly across the world, is just a lot more talking and a lot more frank, honest conversation about the problems that we have. And I think, like we were talking about before with design improvements, I think they will lead to really meaningful change. I certainly hope during this period. But Amy, you should probably jump in here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think internally we have shared that we're spearheading a diversity and design consortium, sort of recognizing the fact that the industry is very white. And so what's the pipeline problem?
Very male.
Very male. And how do you get more Black and brown designers onto our designer page, into architecture firms, into interiors firms, urban planning? Like, I think design is having a reckoning, looking inward and at itself, being like, we're part of the problem. So what do we do to help change it? And I think, again, the pipeline is the problem. So how is Herman Miller helping with design education in communities, or mentorship or internships? And I think really doing the work to make space at the table to have design be a more inclusive practice, because I think it has to be in order to be good design. And who better than Herman Miller, who's sort of always been at the vanguard of what's happening in design, to like try to do the work to figure it out and unpack like the many different places where we can do better.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, and I've certainly heard other people say this, I think it's a really important time for reflection on what we can all do as individuals, right? Like, most of us are in a fortunate enough position to be, hiring people either now or in the future, to be, investing in companies that support our, the businesses that we're running, and we make those kind of decisions on a daily basis, and just making sure that we spend the time to critique internally, like, are we hiring all the same type of people? Are we investing, hiring all the same type of vendors? Do they all look, the same? And certainly, I think it's also a really important time for personal reflection, as well as obviously company values and policies.
Are there certain designers that you guys are seeing on the up and coming that maybe they're diverse designers, or people that you're seeing that are really thinking about space and how we work and live within a space at one time with children in our background, that you guys would comment on?
I think someone that I've really liked following during COVID times on Instagram, which is one of my favorite places to like find design inspiration, is an account called Hood Mid-Century Modern, and it's run by a guy named Gerald Cooper, who is now based in Cincinnati. But it's sort of he has lived in LA, he's lived in London, but has just sort of started to become an architecture like geek and look around his own neighborhood in the West End in Cincinnati and start to try to understand, like, okay, what architecture is important? Because the church that my grandma went to growing up, that was a mid-century modern design, was just raised for a soccer field. So like, what architecture gets saved or is important or is sort of ensconced as good design and culture? And it's him also finding like Nelly country grammar video where Eero Saarinen's arch is behind him in St. Louis. So just finding notable architecture and design and context. Like, I mean, there's an awesome, the New York Times did a short film with Ice Cube a few years ago about his, he went to drafting school before he committed to doing NWA, and he's like, I love architecture. Like, I'm here at the Eames house, and here's what I learned about Charles and Ray Eames. So just, you know, finding inroads into, you know, I think again, a very white industry, but putting a different lens on like who design is for, who good design is by, and having fun with it. I mean, it's sort of like if you like architecture blogs, it's, you know, everything from Googie restaurants to cool old gas stations to like the Neutra VDL house. So he's my favorite design curator on the up and coming and editor.
Yeah, and I would also, I think it's important to also acknowledge the kind of gender imbalance that still exists in modern furniture design. And, you know, some of my favorite designers right now are the Egg Collective, which is a really fantastic female design trio. If you get a chance to check out the Emmy sofa, it is, I think, one of the most beautiful pieces of furniture, like an amazing curved sofa that doesn't have seams, and it just looks incredible and really, I think, well suited to a modern aesthetic.
That's awesome.
Like we all wrote that down.
Yeah,
I wrote it down now.
It's so beautiful. You have to check it out. And it's even like going back to our conversation before, like, you know, it looks beautiful online, but it's so much nicer in like, it's a single piece of fabric that curves around. It's so cool.
It's amazing. I want to express appreciation to you all because, you know, I think that reckoning, or, you know, just that introspective action that you all are taking internally, you know, every industry is like facing that, and it just takes brands and people who are willing to go in and do it. I mean, we're doing it ourselves here at Basic. We're all taking a look introspectively, and it's nice there's no easy answers, there's no shortcuts, and it's just about really having a conversation about like, what are our values. So I respect that. I'm glad you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and I'd also say, like, in terms of us in the industry, I still think we're in the like first inning on this question. You know, there's a lot of attention and focus, but we've got a long way to go, and we're very focused on it. So, you know, hopefully we can keep having this conversation and progress.
Awesome. Hey, so Eric's shooting me over. There's somebody had a question. I think it was like a little bit of a follow-up to something. I don't know if you mentioned it, Ben, or you, Amy, but somebody asked, I hope I pronounced his name right. Avni Levy asked, I'm curious to know about sustainability in furniture design as a growing movement. What are you seeing changing in the industry?
I could get us going, Amy, and then, you know, it'd be great to hear from you. You know, I think that it's important to recognize that our industry is one of the biggest contributors, particularly to landfill, in you know, North America, but globally. You know, I think the latest estimate from the EPA is about 10 million of landfill every year come from furniture, right? It's obviously big and bulky, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of focus on, you know, I don't want to name competitors, but, you know, focus on, you know, just for we're moving more often, and just buy what you need for this space and throw it out and buy it again, right? So certainly, I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, I'm relatively new to Herm Miller, but it was part of the reason I joined is the fact that we're selling heirlooms, right? Not landfill. That's certainly our goal. And there's great evidence for that. You know, these are products that many of which go up in value over time. So while I fully appreciate how expensive they can be for a lot of people, but there is true value there, and they can be investment pieces. And I think the more we can evolve, think about buying stuff to last, and really want to buy things that we hand down to next generations, I think that's a big part of the sustainability story. But there's a lot we're doing around materials, etc. But Amy, you've been part of the group for much longer than me. But what are some of your perspectives on this?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll just quote Dieter Rams and say less but better. And thankfully, that is like, we sell stuff that, as Ben said, are heirlooms, and we can help people make really informed, sustainable purchases, in the sense that you intend to keep this thing that you're bringing into your life. And like, I have a collector mentality, so clearly, like, I love the things in my space and they're considered, but that's a better way to buy things and participate in capitalism, like make informed purchases. And we can do that about our product. And then also, like, there's an inherent secondhand value to it. Even sometimes vintage pieces can be more expensive than the one that you can buy today. It's pretty crazy that you can still use something that was made in 1958 or designed then. But I think, yeah, I remember there's a story with the Eames Lounge and Ottoman. We decided very early on not to use rosewood, which was like the original spec for it. It's what Charles wanted. Like, kind of didn't want one to be made unless it was rosewood and black leather. But before they started, saving the rainforests, Herman Miller kind of decided earlier on, like, we're not going to use rosewood anymore. All to say that we're kind of always looking inward of how we might do something better. We're working with a program called Next Wave, where we're using ocean plastics for things like trays and some of our contract furniture. So, we have a whole team internally that's considering, from a materials perspective, how we can do better, while at the same time, as Ben said, we're not making landfill. We're making something that you can either hopefully take with you or get your money back if you want to put it up on Craigslist or something.
That's amazing. And do you guys see, I'm curious, like, do you see a change in the conversation around, like, the materials, the sustainability, like, from consumers as well? I know that this is like a growing movement, but I'm curious if you've noticed it in terms of, like, what people are asking for specifically too.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite thing, it's difficult to do right now, but I love getting into our retail locations and chatting to our account executives just to hear what they're hearing, because I think it's such an important input to the designs that we're doing online. And certainly I hear it all the time that these questions are coming up more and more. And, the advice I'm always getting is, like, you need to put more of this information on our product pages so people don't have to ask the question and they have it at their fingertips. So yeah, that's certainly happening. And I could say, to Amy's point, I sit on our leadership team for the group, and we probably don't go a week without talking about sustainability in some way, shape, or form. We're really passionate about the ocean plastics question. We're working on some pretty exciting things to come there. So yeah, we're taking it seriously, and I think it's reflective of customers and what they're asking us to do. And I'm, that's when commerce is working well, right? When it's this kind of symbiotic relationship between what customers are wanting and how we're thinking about it.
That's awesome. I had I don't want to monopolize all the questions, guys. Sorry. But I think one of the interesting things I'm thinking about off the top of my head has been, I talked about this a little bit, or I alluded to this earlier, with, like, the pendulum swing, right? And I think as human beings, like, our intimate locations we've seen an investment and attention on that, but I'm curious if you've all thought about what social environments will look like moving forward too, because I think that's where I see an interesting value shift that changes. Not when you're around the people that you know and you're close to and trust. It's about when you're not necessarily around those, the coffee shop, or the train
Office.
station lobby. Yeah, yeah, it was The Office.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on it in regards to like the future of workspaces, right? Like at least not in the near term. Are you going to see offices at full capacity? And there's a good chance that we'll never return to that. You know, a lot of people are really embracing this work-life balance that does come with remote workforce and working from home, or at least having a flexible schedule to be able to do so. And one conversation that we're having at Basic is really talking about like, what does the future of the working environment look like? Because you're going to have dispersed teams, and that's going to require, you know, like more intentional spaces for people to have, you know, the ability to like go into a phone booth and have a quick little meeting, because not everybody is going to be in the office and able to get into a meeting room. And so kind of thinking more about like less desk space and more meeting space that will allow for like private conversations. Because otherwise we're going to have a situation where, you know, you're going to have, I don't know, 5 designers presenting work in the middle of a pit, trying to talk over each other. And so really thinking about instead, how do you turn it into a space that allows for more intentional social interactions in regards to like specific workshops and meetings, and then alternatively a place that allows people to come into office but have a private space to be able to present work or take a meeting or have a very private conversation. And so that's something that we're thinking about on the operations side at Basic, is just like, what does that new working environment look like with our office space?
That's amazing. Spoken like a true VP of operations. I don't even know that there are any.
Like,
you can tell what's on the.
I've got lots of thoughts on this topic. I think we could talk about this for a long time, but
yeah, I actually love this stuff. This is like what I live for.
I'm happy to get going on this, and that is, you know, I think what we've all learned, right, is that that, you know, work from home can actually be better than we probably expected in many instances, right? But there can be challenges, and you know, I think the classic, you know, trade-off that we're all experiencing is, and certainly, you know, we've been looking at a lot of data that suggests this, is that it can be actually better for focused work than being in an office, but it tends to be not as good for collaborative work, and I think in particular for you know, activities that require a lot of spontaneous and ad hoc interaction. And I feel particularly bad for people that are starting a new job and looking for kind of on-the-job apprenticeship and networking, and generally learning and development opportunities. I think are harder to happen because it has to be organized and more formal, and so there are definitely you know, I think some downsides. I also think just from a really human standpoint, and again, I've been reading up on this because I'm very fascinated by this topic, you know, what ultimately makes us happy. And I think one of the most highly correlated aspects of our life with happiness is feeling like you're part of a community and feeling that sense of belonging and community, right? And I don't know if you all feel this, but I feel like for me, it's harder to feel that when you're just in one place. And I also think, you know, going back to some of the earlier comments, I think it was you, Andrew, that was talking about the different zones in your house. I think as human beings, we have a real need to move about. You know, if you think about it, we've been a species for 200,000 years, but we've only really lived in one place for like 3,000 years, right? Before that, we were typically nomadic. And I think that's really tough from this work from home. Like, you tend to just stay in one spot, you know, for the vast majority of time. And I think it's very unnatural for us, right? So what does this all mean? I do think it's unlikely that the world will go back to 5 days a week in the office, you know, flying around the world for, you know, at the drop of the hat to attend some meeting. Like, I think these behaviors are going to change, but I certainly think the office is going to continue to play a really important role for collaboration, for ad hoc interactions for learning and development, for mentorship. But it may be on specific days where it makes sense, not every day. And so therefore the environments that we'll need to adapt to better facilitate those behaviors, those activities. And I think to the coffee shop comment, we'll continue to move about, work a little bit from home, work a little bit from a coffee shop when it's safe to do so. Spend days in the office when it makes sense.
It's so interesting that what you're also, everything you said, Ben, I 100% agree with. And it's exactly what we're thinking about as well at Basic. And personally, for me, like one of the biggest struggles or one of the things I miss the most is just those like passing in the hallway conversations of just like interacting with people that I don't work with on a day-to-day basis, or just like the oh, hey, this just happened, by the way, and I wanted to give you a heads up on it. That those types of interactions, what I'm finding is, like, to your point, I'm either not interacting with people that I used to interact with all the time because I miss out on those, kitchen and hallway moments with, working remotely, but also the times that, things could have been solved in a hallway now require a Zoom meeting. You gotta get on a call and be very intentional about it. And the next thing you know, your whole schedule is filled up with what would have just been hallway conversations. And it'll be really interesting because I really think you're right on about something, is that we're going to evolve. Something is going to become the new normal. And maybe, I don't know, I'm just saying this out loud, like maybe hallway conversations will be a thing of the past, or they'll turn into a new form. And we'll learn and adapt to a new way of engaging with each other. And that will be the future of how we work.
I love that. I've often felt like during this thing, the two things that are missing the most are the water cooler and the whiteboard. And like, those are the things that I'm like, I don't know how we replace that. But I think, both of those points, and Ash and Ben, like I think those are really incredibly point that I couldn't agree more with some of the challenges we face in the new world we're kind of we're in, and we'll continue to kind of work towards. But I know we're almost at time, so I just wanted to say, first of all, appreciate you both, Amy and Ben, for joining us and having a conversation. It's always nice to hear new perspectives and bring friends in to talk about interesting subjects, and everybody else from our team to join. But I'll leave it there. Any final thoughts from anybody before we kind of wrap things up?
Amy, how do I get a job working for you?
Ooh. Asking for a friend.
I think that's the best job in the world. Seriously.
My job, sometimes I feel like, well, George Nelson said this, but like that literally gets to be my job. So George Nelson said the office should be like a daytime living room, and now we're like living that every single day. I hope this all amounts in more empathy for one another as we all get each other from our houses, whether we have kids or not, and just like, it's a good slowdown, and hopefully that holds over when we inevitably get back to communal spaces. But maybe then it won't be weird to be like, I gotta do head down and I'm just gonna stay at home today.
Well, awesome. I'll be looking in the next debate for the Ariane chair, if it happens. But thank you guys all for joining, and hopefully we get to do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having
Thanks so much for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.